Clicking is better than typing, so we use a pad elevator tool to elevate each one of our pads above the street curb. It says select TC surface elevation label 1 insertion point. I hover over the elevation label, says select pad, select object. So I pick a pad feature line object, then I pick the next elevation, then I pick the next pad, then I pick the next elevation, then I pick the next pad and the next elevation, and it elevates those pads. Now, what's it doing? Well, this street is draining from left to right, and we want every pad to be high enough that its side yard can drain out the high side, but we don't want it so high that if, in the case in this subdivision, that the driveway is on the low side, we don't want it so high that the driveway is too steep. So we gave this pad elevator some rules. We said the pad is not allowed to be higher than a certain amount above the curb at the edge of the driveway. And it can't be any lower than a certain amount above the curb at the edge of the driveway here. So what it does when we pick these two spot elevations is it calculates the slope between them, calculates the elevation at the edge of the driveway here, calculates the elevation at the edge of the driveway here, calculates what the minimum pad elevation is, calculates what the maximum pad elevation is, then it splits the difference according to the bias we gave it, whether we're trying to use up dirt or whether we're trying to get more dirt. And the way that all that works is using the pad elevate options, which we have given the nickname of PPPP. We give it this option. We tell it that the minimum difference between the high curb and the pad is such and such. The maximum difference between the pad and the low curb is such and such. The distance from the high curb to the driveway is so many feet. The distance from the low curb to the driveway is so many feet. And we told it this time to give a bias of -1. In other words, put it at the bare minimum elevation every time. Don't split the difference. I'll run through these options to show you the prompts you get. Specify the minimum pad elevation relative to the high TC for backyard drainage. Well, I just threw in for demonstration purposes a ½ foot. So I'll hit return. And we'll try low TC difference. Specify the maximum pad elevation relative to the low TC for driveway slope. Well, I'll accept that. I just gave it something for demonstration purposes. HD, high side distance. Specify the distance of the high edge of the driveway from the high property line. Or 0 if we want to drain to the curb at the property line. If you don't want to cheat and say we can drain over the curb, you want to hurt yourself and say we have to drain over the property line, well then put 0. For the purposes of the demo, I'm using 7. And then the low driveway edge distance. Specify the distance of the low edge of the driveway from the low property line. Again, if you want to go all the way to the property line, which is going to hurt you, you can put 0. We did 7 for the demo. And then the last option is bias. If there's wiggle room, do you want to make them as high as possible? That would be 1 uses the highest limit. Do you want to make them as low as possible? -1 uses the lowest limit. Do you want to put them right down the middle, split the difference? Well, 0 uses the average. And if you want to just violate your rules, you could tell it more than 1 or less than -1. We told it -1 because I wanted it to be easy to see what it was calculating. In order to make it easy for us, let's run a check where we say that the high driveway edge distance is 0. The high TC difference we know is 1/2 foot. So these pads ought to wind up 1/2 foot above the high side. Let's try it. The nickname we gave pad elevate was PPP. So select an insertion point of the label. I'll click a label and it's got the O snap to the insertion point. I click the pad and I click the other label. Now it's 2739, so the pad should go to 2789. And it did. Pick the next pad, pick the high side. It calculates that, 2938. So it's just what we expected. Now a nice thing about this is that if your street is too steep, it can become impossible to follow your rules because the driveway's well, especially if the driveway's on the wrong side of the house. You might have to change your rules or change your driveway distances or something to make it work. And the way that looks when that happens is like this. Let's run our options. PPP, I believe, is the nickname we use for options. And let's say that the driveway has to be 1 foot above the high side, and it can only be 2 feet above the low side, which it says right there. So I'll just go ahead and get out of that, and now I'll try PPP. It says pick a insertion point. Well, there's one. Now pick the pad. Now pick the next insertion point, and it says, whoa! I can't be lower than 2689. I can't be higher than 2664. That's not possible. Is the street too steep? I calculated 3.3%. So that's how that works. If that's the case, you know you've got to force the driveway to the high side, and you would do that by going into PPP, the options, and you would set that low driveway edge distance to bigger to push the driveway over to the high side. Or relax some other constraint or flatten your street somehow. Whatever works for you and your developer friends. Now where do I get this tool? This tool is available, and I'll give the URL in the description. I want to talk about a couple of things. And the first one is, where did these numbers come from? There's a lot of intelligence in how high the pad's allowed to be above the low edge of the driveway. This is the spreadsheet where we calculated those coveted values. How much above the bottom can it be, and how much above the top does it have to be? Bottom for driveway slope, top for backyard drainage. The second thing I want to go over is how we are making all this work for pad grading. Well, the first thing is we've got spot elevation labels that you've seen I'm picking. I guess it's these magenta ones. Those are spot elevation labels, and it's reading the elevation at those labels. So those have to be labeled at every property line, which is pretty normal for subdivision design. The second thing is that we have on each lot a standard pad grading feature line that includes labels and fixed grading. We do not change for any lot this grading. If you go and look, every single lot is 0.55 from the low side to the high side. 94, 39, 85, 30. They're all the same difference, and that goes for all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 elevations fixed for every lot. So when that thing gets elevated, all 9 of those get elevated together. The question is, how do we put those on all the lots? And that we do with the MoCoRo, move, copy, rotate command that I wrote that lets you choose a selection set. So we would choose this feature line, choose the base point and rotation, and then choose a selection set, a target selection set of objects or blocks, and it will copy, move, and rotate that to every single one. And by having a pad block on every lot, we were able to copy these to the lot. Now, just a note, I tried. You would think that you could just embed these things in a block and then explode it. AutoCAD couldn't handle that. It's not logically wrong, but AutoCAD couldn't handle it. Civil 3D couldn't handle it. How we put these feature lines on every lot? Well, here we have our meticulously, lovingly crafted feature lines with labels for leftward draining and rightward draining lots. So if we go to this subdivision, we know it drains in this direction. All these lots here are going to be rightward draining. So we can use Haws-MoCoRo to copy the rightward draining objects to that row of lots. Let's try it. The nickname we came up with for Haws-MoCoRo was CCCC. So I'll type that, then I'll pick my feature line pad grading objects. I'll pick the base point that matches my pad block on all the lots, which is the front middle, the rotation that matches them, and then I'll say copy all that to a selection set. And I know that these are all rightward draining, so I'll pick them all. Make sure my O-snaps are off. That wouldn't be good if they were on. Could get confused. My running O-snaps are off. And, hit return one more time to finish my selection set, and it copies this pad grading feature line and its labels to every lot. So that's how we set those up. And then we run that pad elevator.